mentioned, and it struck me when you were at the podium, when you said it, and I want to shift just a touch. You said a line, and I think this is probably why most of you are here. I guess it's because of the energy that you draw with your words. You said the drone does not recognize silent. That blew me away just now. That hit me in the head. Like, yeah, all of the maps, all of the, we have these rights, and this drone doesn't recognize any of that. And as you talked about the simultaneity of things, I guess what I'm getting at is, for us in the room, can you talk about what this gift that you have means to you? You just impacted me. I'm an older guy, an older black man from Prince George's County, I don't know. And you just impacted me in a way that I hadn't been impacted. That's a power that you have.
I mean, I feel a lot of gratitude. I appreciate it very much. I think that so much of my work stems from attempting to create the sort of work that I wish I had when I was a kid. When I sat down to write How the Word Is Passed, I tried to write the sort of history book that I felt like I needed when I was 15, 16 years old. The sort of book that would have helped me understand who I was in relationship to my city, my state, my country. The sort of book that would have given me clarity to understand that the reason one community looks one way and another community looks another way is not because of the people in those communities, but because of what had been done to those communities generation after generation after generation. So I often write to answer questions for myself, right? For me, when I was watching those statues come down in New Orleans, 6 years ago now, I had a moment where I was like, I grew up, I'm the descendant of enslaved people. My grandfather's grandfather was enslaved. I grew up in a city that was the heart of the domestic slave trade at the mouth of the Mississippi River. And I had a realization that I was like, I don't understand the history of slavery in a way that's commensurate with the impact and legacy that it has had on this country. I should understand it much better than I had a very surface level understanding of it 7 years ago. And for me, I wanted to, the more I learned about it, the more I was like, if I had had this information when I was younger, it would have just been so freeing. I felt when I was a kid, I remember I don't know if it was like this for you all in Prince George's, but growing up as a kid in New Orleans, in the 80s and 90s, we were inundated with all these messages about all the things that were wrong with Black people. That the reason there's so much violence, crime, and poverty is because of things that Black people were doing to ourselves or failing to do. And I was, it came from the media, it came from politicians. And I knew that what I was hearing was wrong, was kind of distorted, but I didn't know how to say it. I didn't have the language. I didn't have the history. I didn't have the toolkit with which to push back against it. I think what happens, especially for young people, is that when you're inundated with the message telling you about all the things that are wrong with you, and you don't know how to counter it, it can become very, I felt sort of a sort of paralysis, right? Like I felt like a straitjacket was around me, and I didn't know how to get it off. But when I went to college, when I went to grad school, and I started reading these books, I started watching these films, I started encountering art that transformed my understanding of the history of this country and gave me a real sense of the stories about this country and what Black people have been subjected to in this country that I had not been conscious of before. And I think this is, that it helped that I started grad school the same period of time that like Black Lives Matter was becoming a sort of major force. I started grad school the same week Mike Brown was killed. And so my experience, sitting in the library for, 12 hours a day was that I was reading the sort of sociological text that helped explain so much of what we were seeing out in the world. And I just remember reading those books and feeling sort of a sense of freedom and a sense of agency that had been as if it had been restored to me. And I was just like, if I knew this information when I was young, it would have just disabused me of so much pathology and so much. It wasn't self-loathing, but it was just, if people keep telling you something and you don't have the information to say something else, you begin to internalize some of that message. And it's a very natural thing. It's a very human thing. And I was just like, man, if somebody, why didn't I learn some of this stuff? Like the stuff that I'm talking about in this book, I'm like, I should have learned this in 8th grade social studies. And if I had, how much of that confusion, how much of that questioning, how much of that would have been pushed aside? How much more confident would I be about, and how much more of a sense of who I was in relation to the world would I have if I had that information? Because I think sometimes people think like, oh, if we teach young Black kids like about all the oppression they experienced, that they'll just be, they'll be like, well, the world wants me to fail anyway. And I think if you teach it in a certain way, that can be the message. But I think what can also happen is that you create an understanding that like there's nothing inherent about being a Black person. There's nothing innate to Blackness that makes it so that Black people are disproportionately experiencing violence, poverty, and crime. It is that it's a history of public policy decisions. It's a history of decisions people made that gave certain groups of Americans opportunities for upward mobility and prevented Black Americans and other groups of Americans from having access to those same levers of upward mobility that would allow for us to not be suffering from so many of the sort of ailments that our community is suffering from now.
Well, I want to say, brother, the way that you articulate it and the way that you express it and explain it to us is A1. And the diversity of this crowd is, sort of testament to that. America squirms when we bring up these. It's done. Oh, here we go with the Black stuff again. And so for you to be able to get a diverse room together where nobody's tripping and everybody's eager to hear what you have to say, that's that power that I was speaking about earlier. So kudos to you. We want to take a couple of questions. We're not going to take a ton, but we will take a few. So if anyone has questions, you want to open it up.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. You got. I'm going to hand you the microphone. Please tell us your name.
My name is Karen Jerkowicz, and I'm not from here. I'm visiting my sister who lives in Bowie, and I love the diversity of this whole area. I love it.
Welcome to Bowie.
Thank you.
Right up the street.
And there you go. And I live in Gulf Breeze, Florida. And, so hearing you, the clarity and the purity and the elegance, as opposed to inelegance, of what your words are so meaningful. And I think to everyone in this room. I know what's happened in my area and certainly governmentally in my state is utterly appalling and despicable. So how do we address the educational component of a state that wants to remove, or that has removed African American history? Has removed advanced placement in African American history. It's disgusting. It's despicable. And it makes me so terribly sad. How do we address that?
Welcome to Nightline.
No, I mean, it's Florida is ground zero in many ways for the sort of backlash to so much of what, at every period of racial progress that there has been in any throughout American history, when there has been moments of shifts in sort of consciousness with regard to race and racism, opportune sort of economic, political, or social mobility that Black folks have experienced, there's always been pushback. After Reconstruction, there was immense pushback, right? The soldiers between 1865, 1877, federal troops were here, in the South protecting Black people, ensuring they had the right to vote. There were Black senators and Black congressmen, and then the federal troops left with the Presidential Compromise of 1877. And then the Ku Klux Klan rose up and Black voting rates plummeted. And we entered a period of Jim Crow for 70, 80 years. And, after the Civil Rights Movement, there was intense pushback. And so, Black Lives Matter movement, loosely defined, like lasted for a sort of decade and was supercharged by the murder of George Floyd. And there was this huge shift in public consciousness, obviously, that we all experience. And that people and companies and organizations were like giving renewed commitment to diversity, inclusion, opportunity. And I think many of us have seen how quickly those promises, and so much of that has receded because of so much of the pushback that has happened. And so I just bring that up because it's important to be aware that it is consistent with things that have happened previously in history. That at any moment that there's progress, that there's been intense backlash. So, what to do? I mean, I think that one of the important things to do, one is just to arm yourself and those in your circles with that, because they can prevent people from doing things in school, assigning certain books in schools or having certain courses, but they can't prevent you from doing what you want to do in your house, in your home, with your family. So, I always tell people, like, if there's something you see your child or your community isn't learning in school, school is just one place that education happens. Education happens in all sorts of other places. Some of the most important educations I've gotten have very much been outside the classroom. So there's that. And also, I think part of what happens is that the voices that are arguing for the removal of books and removal of curriculum and removal of anything that makes people feel any sense of discomfort, those voices just tend to be much louder than the actual amount of people who carry those sort of sensibilities, right? And so part of it is that it is important for us to show up to the school board meetings and to write to the city councilman it can feel, it's one of those things that can feel like it doesn't matter a lot. But if the only people that our local officials and our federal officials are hearing from are those who are the angry, reductive, bigoted voices, that shapes their sense of like what's happening out in the world. So I think it's just really important beyond your social media, beyond like those. I'm not somebody who's like what you do or what you tweet or post on Facebook doesn't matter, but like that can only be the beginning of a sort of involvement. And so yeah, I think that so much creating alternative environments in which those sort of education opportunities can exist. And also making sure that we are countering the voices on the other side who are trying to prevent our young people from learning about the history of this country that explains why our country looks the way that it does today.
This is my 30th year in Prince George's County as an educator. And great leaders in the audience who are doing great work in Prince George's County. My question is a little different from what you were just discussing. I want to be a writer. And I started reading your book when I saw that you were coming. I haven't finished it yet. Love the poems. I have a topic that I feel hasn't been touched. And I just want to ask advice about, how to get started. I feel like I still have a lot of energy in me to do the work and want to be, that's my next journey. So I'd like to hear about some advice.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think your mom is a testament to that. It's like, it's never too late.
Yeah, I have a book for you, but
Okay.
with her, she has a book called Imagine This that talks about how to become a writer. So it's a novel about becoming a writer.
Sure.
So
there you go.
please.
That's that advice for free.
Yeah. There you go.
So a couple things that I think are really important. If you can create a writing community, and that can look like, there are bookstores in the area that have sort of like writing groups. There are online communities where you can find sort of writing or like, write a novel in 15 weeks. So, they're all different sort of versions of that. And I think that structure can be really helpful, because the thing about being a writer, one of the things that people find most difficult is the lack of structure that is tied to the job, right? It's like, for me, it's like, all right, you sold this book, see you in 2 years. Like, go do it, right? And so it's not a 9 to 5. And if you're writing fiction, the characters are in your head all the time, and it's not like a neat. But I think if you can, for me, part of what has been really helpful is just routine, right? Like, I know this time to this time, I'm gonna make my kids breakfast. This time to this time, I'm gonna drop them off. This time to this time, I'm gonna check my email. This time to this time, I'm gonna write. Then I'm gonna eat lunch. And it's not to say every day looks the same, but I think that writing is something that people think they're like, oh, I want to write. And they think it can become just the thing that they fit into the spare time that they quickly realize doesn't exist. And I think it's something you just have to be really intentional about, like literally putting on your Google Calendar. Like, this is my writing time. In the same way people put like dinner or the gym and I think creating a routine, and also understanding that that like the first draft is just that, right? Like, it's a first draft. I think some people get really um distraught or debilitated, like, by how hard it is to write, or the fact that like what they write at the beginning isn't up to par, up to their standards. And so much of, the best writers will tell you that the best writing is revision, or the most important part of writing is revision. It is, you gotta, like, the best metaphor in some ways is almost like pottery, right? Like, you gotta get the clay onto the spinny thing. I should know the name of it if I'm gonna use this metaphor. On the spinny thing, in order to craft something, right? And like, for me, my first drafts are just like words on the page, right? Because I can always go back and like reshape and reorient. But like, that's what I'm doing. For me, the first draft, I'm kind of just like, whoosh, I just got to get it out. Because once you have stuff, just dumping the clay on the spinny thing. Pottery wheel. There we go. It's intuitive. I should have figured that out. The spinning thing. Onto the pottery wheel, and then you are able to do something with it. So that, and then, for me, the best, most helpful thing in my writing is reading. And so I always start my writing by like reading something. I keep a list of like words that I encounter that I love, phrases that I love. And sometimes just looking at that, reading somebody else's work, it's almost like, I played sports my whole life. It's almost like the warm up before the game, right? Like, sometimes you just got to warm your brain up, like read some, we all have our favorite writers, like read some Toni Morrison, read some, Jhumpa Lahiri, read just whoever it is, just to get you going, and then it kind of puts you in the frame of mind. Of course, don't forget the word granularity.
I think we have one more question over here in the back. Please tell us your name.
Hi, my name is Francisco Leonard, and I've been an educator for 18 years now. About 8 years ago, I was rooting around TED Talk, and I was looking for some motivational videos for my students, and stumbled upon your video about silence. I happened to be working at a private school that was Catholic, and a lot of the students weren't, but they were in this Catholic institution. So we would hear about the things that were going on in the Catholic Church, or in this society, you had to go to mass, and so there was this, when Lent would come around, there would be this period where all the students would be like, oh, we're giving this up. And when I found the video, it was inspiring, to the point where I played it for multiple years. And I would have this moment with my seniors where there were 4 videos that impacted me. So I wanted it to impact them. And it always amazed me how, when you talk about being silent, how you would hear more. And I would have these discussions with my students afterwards, after hearing a video. And I was like, guys, do you understand what's going on? Do you understand, how this feels? And they would tell me about times that they would be reflective of being silent. or when they held back their voice. And so my question is, are you still silent? Do you practice silence during Lent? You know, like, is that a thing? Or, you know, have you kind of expanded that into your children?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Truly, I mean, one of the reasons that I think I do what I do, it's both for the sort of younger version of me, but also, you know, to hear the way that educators use my work in their classrooms. I mean, it means everything. It's why I did some of you might be familiar with the YouTube series Crash Course Black American History. I did that because I wanted to create a resource for educators. I want this book to be a resource for educators. I wanted to write the sort of poems that teachers would feel like they could teach the poem. You know, for me, I reject the idea that artistic integrity necessitates uh, a sort of inaccessibility. And for me, you know, I remember reading poems in class when I was a kid, and I'd be like, does anybody understand what this poem is about? I was like, is it me? Is it me?
Does it rhyme?
And I was just like, I think, you know, I try to also write the sort of poems that I would have wanted to read when I was a, you know, high school student. So I say all that just to extend gratitude, because whether it's a book or a video, it means a lot that you all use the work in your classrooms. And it's one of the reasons that I try to put it out in the world. Am I still silent? I mean, I think, you know, I am human, and I am a person who, you know, to use the word again, I move through the world inelegantly. You know, don't let the words like granularity get you twisted. I'm somebody who wakes up every day and I try my best, and sometimes that it looks good, and sometimes it doesn't. You know, as a spouse, as a parent, as a writer, as a brother, as a son. I think I just try, and some of that means that, you know, and part of what that poem is about is this idea that, like, speaking up or um, pushing away the silence, um, or like becoming a conscious person is not, it's not like a line you cross. It's not a finish line or a threshold that you, like, you're on this side, now you're on the other side. You're like, now I'm a good person. Now I speak up. Now you gotta wake up every day, right? It's like it's a praxis. It's a way of being in the world. It's a way, like, in what way can I wake up and move through the world with generosity and humility and curiosity and courage, to make sure that the person who I am gets a little bit closer to the person that I want to be. And I think that's just what I try to do. And sometimes I get closer to that person that I want to be, and sometimes I stumble back. But I just try to do my best, and to think about the moment and to learn from the moments that I don't. And that's what I try to communicate to, you know, when I was a high school teacher. That's what I try to communicate to my students. That's what it's just about. So much of what being a writer is and being a person is just like reflection for me. And so I'm just always reflecting on, like, what ways can I do better, be better, and be kinder, and be, you know, better for my kids, for my wife, for the world. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Thank you all so much.
You'll be signing?
I'll be signing out there.
You're signing out there.
So come say hello.
I just want to say, man, thank you for allowing me to be part of this. I'm going to go home and use the biggest words I can around my wife when I leave here. And I'm sure everybody has some things they want to say to me when you're out there signing. So once again, Clint Smith, everybody.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Can I stay in contact?